I'm going to kick off, or no, we still got a couple minutes. Yes. Are these? Is this like a clicker that I can use?
Yeah, if you hit the down. It's a terrible clicker, but yes.
Awesome. Perfect. I'm going to walk around a lot. So is everybody in here at network security?
Nope.
Or
I'm not.
you're not? You're not? Game background?
Animation.
Awesome. And you're also game?
I'm game programming, yes.
All right, awesome. Cool.
And computer science.
Well, this will still be somewhat interesting. It'll at least give you some insight into what this industry is and how insane it is. All right. Where are we at? We just kick off? We're going to close the doors, or are we good to go?
Sure.
Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Bryan Carpenter. Today we're going to talk about the vulnerability research industry and what it is. I'm a cybersecurity engineer for Raytheon Cybersecurity Innovations.
Oh, you're coming in already.
If you guys wanted to look us up, CSI isn't going to be the right one. We just recently went through a rebranding. You can find us under SI Government Solutions. And that's what our previous name was. And ever since we got acquired by Raytheon, we ended up going under a new name, Cybersecurity Innovations. That's all of our companies kind of combined together. This company is a small subsidiary under Raytheon, under the big Raytheon name. We're about as anti-Raytheon as we can be for being part of a big mothership. But the idea is that we all focus on vulnerability research, discovering vulnerabilities in software and profiting from that in some way. So my primary job is to basically find vulnerabilities in software. I reverse engineer weird products. And on the side, I also do interviewing and recruiting, which is why I'm here. You usually will find me at different conferences. I don't usually do the university thing, but I usually am at conferences doing cold talks to give cards out to people and see what they do and try to kind of show them who we are and what our name is. We're primarily out of Melbourne, Florida. We actually have 13 sites. We got about 200 people in Melbourne, Florida, and the other 200 about in the other different sites. And we just mostly start all these other sites simply just because whether our customers are at or we have a large grouping of people there, and so it makes it pretty easy to create a new site. So off the top of my head, we're about South Carolina, Georgia, Maryland, Virginia, Texas. Those are some of the big states that we have our stuff in. But again, headquarters out in Melbourne, Florida. Before all that, I used to work for the National Security Agency. I was part of the Information Assurance Directorate, which if you know anything about the NSA, there's two sides of the house. There's the offense and defense. And I worked part of the defensive industry. This was actually my first job after graduating. And I was part of the Operating Systems Division, which primarily focused on different operating systems. You would become an expert in one, and you would be that person that would, as our DoD customers and military would come up to us, they would say, hey, why is it a bad idea to plug in 40,000 iPads into my network? And you would tell them what the risk was for that. And so that involved a lot of getting familiar with different operating systems, the security measures that were in there. We did a lot of vulnerability discovery to kind of come up with unique ways to patch and mitigate certain classes of bugs. And so that was where the NSA had, vendor relationships to basically say, hey, these are fundamentally broken in your operating system. Here's a recommendation on how to fix that. So that's kind of like what my mission was, and I did this for 3 years before moving on to Raytheon. So I'm a graduate from UAT from 2010. It's kind of crazy how long ago that's been now. But I came out with a network security degree. Since then, when I started going to work for the NSA, I started pursuing my computer science master's at Johns Hopkins University. Some of the nice perks of when you work for the government, the NSA really likes to be able to train their people. And it was a really nice thing to pay for a $40,000 education for free. So thanks for your taxes. All right. But it was really nice because that was it was an excellent education. It was also a very good place to learn about computer science in that way. But I do owe a lot to my network security background because it's what helped me get me into this industry. So enough about me. What we're going to talk about today is the vulnerability research industry. We're going to talk about what it is, why we care about it, what the influence it has on the industry as a whole for just computer and consumer technology. I want to talk about what skills are needed to get into the industry, and most importantly, what's available on the internet for you guys to be able to use now to help kickstart your ability to jump into it. If this is something that's interesting, where you want to find bugs in software, exploitation, that type of thing, then this is definitely going to help. When I started at UAT, I think, well, now it hurts to say that, 12 years ago, there was the NSA that came down and they basically had a similar talk where they're like, hey, by the way, if you do network security, we're centers of excellence. If you take all these classes, you're basically guaranteed a job. And so that was really attractive to me. And so I'm really hoping that if I'm able to show each of you guys some things to help kind of jumpstart your education a little bit, some things to help supplement what you're learning here, getting out when you graduate and you come, interview with me, that you'd be able to get a job out of it. So that's primarily what the goal is. So what is vulnerability research? For the people who don't know, this is Bryan's definition, this is my definition. The idea is that we're going to go through a process of identifying flaws in software and hardware that have the potential to hinder the system's integrity. So the idea is that we have confidentiality, integrity, availability. These are all the things that we want to basically identify flaws in software to figure out how to hinder that. And that's what we want to identify. You have a lot of malware people who write malware, a lot of people who write weapons or create weapons for this type of stuff, and they're basically, the goal is to exploit the system that it's running on. So the goal here is to find exploitable vulnerabilities. And benign crashes, if I'm using my iPad, if I'm using my iPhone or whatever, and I'm just like swiping through things and suddenly my app closes or I get a force close, anything like that. I don't care about benign crashes. I want to find crashes that are caused because of something that I'm doing to the system explicitly to causing it to crash. So what I mean by exploitable, I'm talking about being able to redirect the program's flow to be able to do something that it wasn't intended to do. If I have a password manager, its purpose is to protect passwords, encrypt it maybe, and only let authorized users to access that data. But if I find a flaw in its implementation and how it protects its keys, how it protects the passwords, then I can basically leak sensitive data. Maybe the idea is if I have a piece of software that's running in an escalated environment where I need to do system critical things, and I send it some input that lets me redirect program flow to give me arbitrary code execution in that environment. It lets me be able to do very malicious things to it. If the purpose is to disrupt, disable, and destroy, denial of services are pretty common vulnerabilities, and the idea is that they're not as common, but people like Cybercom care about that type of stuff, where let me send a packet to a network service and it just kills the service permanently. And that's the idea, that I want to create a weapon that I can be able to disrupt the service permanently, so if our adversary has something that is of value, maybe like a missile system or something like that, I want to send it a network packet, kill it, and that way they can't use it against us. That's the type of stuff that they care about. But ultimately, we deal in the industry of information. All of these things are all just things that we know, we discover, we find out about it. We have a document that says, yeah, I found a vulnerability and it affects versions A through Z in a product. And the idea is that we deal in information. We're in the information business. And so we disclose this information either to vendors to get patched. We can get a CVE out of that and get your name kind of out there, get infamous from it. You can present at conferences, in which case ultimately will be presented to the vendors at some point to also get patched. Or this information is sold to companies for profit. And that's where I think some of the controversy in this kind of lies in. But it's a process that's more of an art than it is a science. If I could tell you, okay, steps 1, 2, and 3 will help you find vulnerabilities in software, this wouldn't be an industry, it'd be way too easy. The idea is that it requires expertise, it requires intimacy with the software you're looking at to attack, it requires expertise in that type of stuff, and it can't be as simple as well, find this, step 2 is do this, and step 3 do this. We wouldn't be in a lucrative business if it was like that. I kind of say luck plays a large factor into finding bugs. I think that's absolutely true. It's less so when you become more intimate with the software and you become a bigger expert in it. But the idea is, when I first started working for Raytheon, I was put on a team of 3 other people, and we were tasked to find a vulnerability in a specific product. And we spent at least a month and a half doing it. We were some of the best people on that team were working on it. We were having 0 luck. And one of our managers shows up, and he's off doing manager stuff. And he's like, hey, I got like a couple hours to actually build to engineering time. Let's see if I can do something. He pulls out. 2 hours later, we come out. We come back from lunch, and he's like, I don't know what you guys are wasting your time on. I already found a bug. And it was all luck. And he literally said, here's a list of services that we got. And he said, I closed my eyes, I did this, went up and down a little bit, and I picked a service, and then, so we're just like, how did we spend 4 weeks on this, and then this guy spends 1 hour and finds a bug? It is luck. Luck plays a factor into it, and it sucks because if you don't have that luck factor, sometimes it feels like it's kind of a draining process, but that is part of it. But I would like to think that it plays a factor into it, but some people might disagree with me on that. And there's multiple ways to approach a problem. So if I'm attacking a web browser, for example, my input is HTML code being served up from a server, whether it's malicious or not, but it's being served up from a server, renders that page and shows it to me on my consumer device, whatever that is. That is my attack surface. And so if I'm a malicious user, or if I'm a bad server that's serving up these bad pages, that is how I can basically hit my users, hit the people that I'm interested in looking at. So when I'm attacking this, I can basically reverse engineer a browser. I can find all the code that's influenced by the rendering process. I can create a tool that creates bad HTML and feeds it to the service and continues to test it with variations on that bad data. I could try to come up with some crazy academic way to find bugs automatically. I mean, this is the industry right here. There's multiple ways to approach a problem and find a vulnerability. So that's one of the biggest things. Some require more work. Other people might just be able to say, yeah, I can just create a tool that just automatically throws random data at it, and maybe I'll find a bug, which is extremely easy. You can do that in a day. So why do this? I mean, let's be honest. We all got student loans. We want to make money. That's honestly one of the biggest things here. So there's a high supply, or rather high demand for vulnerabilities in software, and a low supply. So economics will teach us that makes us a very lucrative business to be in. And it's in a very difficult reason. So companies will pay you to do bug bounties. It's much more affordable for a company to say, yeah, we'll pay you $2,000 if you find a bug in our software, versus paying a full-time engineer to sit down and do this all day, every day, and I'm going to pay that person $100,000 a year plus benefits and all that other stuff. So they'd rather just go out there. So it's cheaper for them to say, here's a couple $1 million aside, and we'll pay those out in small increments to other people who are smart, because we know we can't afford the best and the brightest, but we can incentivize that. We can incentivize them to do that with small sums of money. And then, as I said, there's a high demand for these, and some companies are more interested in just buying that information outright. Whether it's I find a bug in a browser, they're willing to buy for a proof of concept, exploits, for whatever reasons after that point. It's up to that company. So what do bug bounties look like? Google was one of the first people to start this. Based on how critical the bug was, you could get paid anywhere from $100 to $31,000. Seems like it's a lot of money, but based on what you're attacking, what the bug affects, determines on how much you get paid outright. Facebook's the same way. They don't really disclose how much they pay, but according to the report they came out with last year, they said anywhere from $500 to $30,000 average. About, I think 1,500 people got paid about $1,300 on average last year on finding bugs in Facebook software. So they have websites. If you just Google company name plus bug bounty program, they're going to come up with a little page that basically says, here are all the websites that are open for you to test on. Here's all of our open source projects that we incorporate into all of our programs. So if you can find a bug in any of that and you disclose it to us, we'll be willing to pay you guys money. And it's just cold hard cash. ZDI is another one. This is where we start deviating from finding bugs to benefit the industry in some way. ZDI is a company owned by HP. Their whole idea was, hey, we're going to create intrusion detection systems, and we're going to crowdsource 0 days. When I'm saying 0 days, who understands what I'm talking about? A couple guys? Okay, so the idea is that if I have knowledge of a vulnerability in a program, and it's exploitable, and I can use that either positively or maliciously, whatever, it's a 0 day because there's no mitigation, there's no patch for it currently. The moment it becomes known to the industry, there's still no patch, no mitigation, it's still a 0 day. And the moment that the vendor puts out a patch and there's a mitigation for it, then it becomes what we call an end day. And that's not the business we're dealing in. We're dealing in business in 0 days. So these guys came up when they said, well, we'll buy all 0 day information and we'll write signatures for our IDS, and we'll advertise that as that we're competing, we have an edge over all of our IDS systems, and so we're just going to basically buy crashes, buy proof of concepts, buy exploits, whatever, from anybody that's willing to sell it to us, and we'll write signatures, and then eventually is the key word, tell the vendor about it. But they want to make sure that they have that competing advantage over other IDS systems. So they have this weird rewards program. You get points for the vulnerabilities you give them, and you can eventually cash out. It's kind of like a Best Buy rewards program. It's really weird system that they do. But they usually fund Pwn to Own, which is a competition where people come together and they say, okay, $100,000 if you can exploit Chrome, the latest version. And it's once a year they'll do that, and we'll talk a little bit more about why that's interesting. Then you have this company right here, Raytheon. They buy, they're very public about it, they will buy exploits. And this is their little system that they have to determine the weight of the money you can make. Anywhere from $10,000 to $300,000 depending. If you have a 0 interaction Windows remote code execution bug, they'll pay you up to $300,000 for it. Mobile payouts anywhere from $15,000 to $1.5 million. And so this is kind of insane. So based on whatever vulnerabilities you're finding in the software, they're willing to pay up to somewhere in some giant payout, right? That's a huge salary if you can get a $300,000 payout. So what are the differences? Like I said, Raytheon's paying for exploits. They want to know versions A through Z is affected by this. Here's a capability that I could do. This requires a full-blown tool chain for it. Google and Facebook, they're willing to just say, yeah, okay, give me an input file that causes it to crash. Let me see if I'll pay for it. They don't care about so much about having an exploit. They care about having a crash that leads to an exploitable vulnerability. So, but like I said, we deal in the business of 0 days. If you're giving them end days, they're not going to pay you. That's just kind of how it works. So there is a catch, though, and I want to say, yeah, I'm throwing these big numbers at you guys. But what if I told you that the companies are willing to increase and say, yeah, I'll pay you $30,000 to find a bug in our software. But the reality is, they know the likelihood of finding something like that is almost 0. They're so confident in their ability and the security of their system that they're willing to say, yeah, we'll pay you big money, but we know that it's going to be the ultimate jackpot. You know, you're not going to, the likelihood of you finding something like that is going to take you a year of research. Maybe you're going to have to spend, not make any money during that time. So yeah, you might make a $300,000 payout, but it's going to probably take you a year and a half to do it. So is it really worth your time in investing in that? Maybe it is, maybe it's not. And the answer is also, you might spend a year and a half looking at a product and still not find anything, and now you're out a year and a half of your life. So is it good to incentivize people to do this? Yes. University students, I think this is a good, let me make a couple $100 here and there if I find bugs in open source projects. Freelancers, I have a couple friends who actually do this, who actually try to live this life of bug bounties. And it's a very interesting life, depending on when you talk to them, time of the year it is, they're either hungry or they're not. And hobbyists, I think that's one of the biggest ones that even if you're not in the business of finding this, doing network security or anything like that, if you find a bug in an open source project that's affecting Chrome or any of these other things, yeah, just throw it their way and you'll make some money off of that, absolutely. But hobbyists, these are the people who just go home and they just do this stuff for fun, and it's not their job. So it is, like I said, some of the people that I know that do this freelance, they can make some income. They're probably making around $2,000 to $3,000 a month, just submitting bug bounties and stuff. But it gets incredibly difficult. You're dealing with you're competing with the entire industry. Everybody's trying to find bugs. Chrome and iOS are two of the most looked at products right now, which is why if I have a full-blown tool chain for iOS, I can get paid $1.5 million. That's how difficult it is right now, because Apple has done such an amazing job of just killing entire classes of bugs in their software now to where, yeah, someone can pay me $1.5 million, but good luck finding a full tool chain for it. So you're competing with the industry. Chrome, you're likely to not find anything. Chrome has everybody looking at it. Chrome was advertising numbers saying that they were doing test cases against Chrome. They were doing somewhere around $1 billion a day now. So now they're just testing every iteration of that program. So they're killing this stuff. So this industry, so like I said, as the industry starts to wane a little bit, the demand for it and the prices for these types of things get higher. So the alternatives, maybe you don't want to live a life of bug bounties. These are people who will look into commercial products. Maybe, you know, TrailBits is a new company that came out a couple years ago. They basically said, we're not going to do any government work publicly, but we're not going to do any government work, and we're just going to basically, we're just going to look at applications. We're going to advertise to other companies out there, and we say, if you have an app, you have a program or something you want us to do a vulnerability assessment, this is what we're going to look at. We're going to do that's their niche. Immunity does both of that. They do government work and they do commercial work. Vulnerability Research Labs is another company that's been doing this. They do strictly government work. Raytheon does strictly government work. And I'm not talking about government work in the sense of, here's this weird government product. Although we do that, we do weird government products. We also do Raytheon products. Fun fact, Raytheon's well known for missile systems, and so they'll come to us and say, hey, is our missile vulnerable to attacks on the way to its target? The answer will scare you. And so, you know, we do a lot of that stuff, but we also look at commercial products for government use cases. So that's the alternative. And so why do we do that? Because the difference between working for companies like this versus being a freelancer bug bounty person, you know, you got to align your goals with the customer, with the customer, or even with the company. You're kind of working on the thing that the company thinks that you should be working on because that's what's going to make them money. You're working under their time constraints. Maybe if I have a 1-year contract looking at a product, that's all I get. I don't get to do anything else beyond that. And usually requires an NDA. So you work for TrailBits, they're going to say, yeah, come look at this commercial product, but I'm going to be under an NDA. I won't be able to talk about it to anybody. So if you're a freelancer, you're a person out in the public, very rare. I mean, you're likely to make yourself a name in the industry as a person who finds bugs. That's what you do. If you're working for all these any other companies, you could still kind of work on the name a little bit if that's what you care about, but for the most part, you kind of live a life of secrecy. And I also throw out security clearance because some of these companies here require you to have it. And so the vulnerability research industry is incredibly small. So small that you can probably know everybody pretty well. Yeah?
I noticed, so how do you get a security clearance when everybody requires one?
Right.
Because I noticed when I looked at the jobs, more than half of them, like in the government, you have security clearance.
Right. So let's talk about that. So having a security clearance is incredibly important in this industry. So because we're already a smaller industry, people who find bugs in software that's really good at it is very rare. And then being able to have a clearance makes it even more hard, makes it even more difficult. But having a security clearance will increase your salary on average around the industry about $20,000 to $30,000 a year. It is incredibly valuable to have a clearance. So how do you get one? Well, you can go work for the NSA, or you can go work for some government agency that gives you one. That's how I got mine. I worked for the agency, I got my security clearance, and then I left the agency with my security clearance, and then became incredibly valuable because I had that. Yeah, you can't just go and apply and just get one. You have to be sponsored by some agency. You have to be sponsored by some part of the government that's going to be willing to give it to you. This is becoming an really hard for us. There have been a few incidents in the public. Everyone's heard of it. Brennan Snowden has made this incredibly harder to get. It takes a long time. It's not that it's harder to get, it's just that it takes longer to get, which people's weight and people's patience for it starts to wane after about 2 years. And that's probably what it takes. A 2-year wait is what we've been seeing now. But, and this is because there's a lot of people wanting to clearances, and it's just not going through because now this is becoming a much more strict process. So getting a security clearance, you're gonna have to work for a company like Raytheon will sponsor one. Yeah.
You know how far back they're starting to go now? Like, are they starting to look at your grandparents' grandparents? And
I don't think the process has changed at all. I don't think the process has changed. It's just taking before they might have just been like, here's the paperwork, all right, let's just throw it out the door, we're good to go. And now they're actually looking at every line item you put on there.
You already have, say, a confidential, would it be faster to go out secret?
No, I wish it would. I wish you could say, here's a confidential, here's a secret. Most people are going to require top secret, which is the hardest one to get, which is what it takes 2 years to do. You can get a secret in a couple months, sure, why not? But it turns out it's not really useful. Not that it's not useful. Some companies might use that, but ultimately, well, we've seen a lot of the government work coming in requires that on your resume that you have a top secret, even if the work is unclassified, confidential, or secret. It seems really stupid, but that's just the way that the government works, which is government stupid. Okay. So security clearance, absolutely consider thinking about it, because it's definitely going to make you a lot of money in the long term, but also gives you access to really cool work that's really exciting. So that's, if you have the ability to do that, work for a company that's able to sponsor for it. And yeah, it's 2 years of wait about right now, but it is well worth it, in my opinion. So working for companies like this, bug bounties, you get them as you find bugs. Here I get paid every other week. I have all of my benefits. I get a 401k. I get to work with a team environment. If you're a freelancer and you're working with other people on a team, guess what? Your bounties are going to be split up now. So now you're making less money. These guys, I work with all of my guys. They all make their own money. If we find a bug, they're going to most likely give us a payout for it. I don't split my payout. We each get our own payouts, which is really nice. All right, I get vacation and pay time off. My friends who do this freelance, they don't. They don't take a break. So, aside from money, because I'm talking a lot about money, and I really want to emphasize because it is a lucrative business, but if you're a person who likes finding bugs, who likes doing puzzles, who's not going to just like give up frustrated real quick, who's going to just look for the answers, what's the answer to the puzzle, can Google that, run away. If you're that person, this isn't for you. And I mean that kindly. But if you're persistent with trying to find things, solve puzzles and that stuff, this will be kind of your business, because the idea of finding a vulnerability is going to take a very long time. It's part of the whole roller coaster of emotions that you get through with doing this. But I think that there's a sense of reward protecting consumers. So the nice thing about working for the NSA is that we had the ability to kill classes of bugs and protect people who are consumers of devices that use these things day in, day out. Like my whole background is all in Apple. So I'm an Apple fanboy now because of it. But I know that Apple is one really tough cookie to crack, and that's why I continue to use it. The other thing is, if you have a clearance or if you have the ability to work for the government in any way, supporting our military and government, I know there's a lot of government haters and stuff like that, but that's okay. Having seen this stuff firsthand is one of the most important reasons why I continue to do what I do. Being able to support our military and find the bad guys and stop them. That's a significant reason why to get into this business. So we need skills, obviously, to do this type of stuff. And I took an average of every company that I've listed so far and some other ones that I know, and looked at their job recs and kind of took an average of what they wanted. This is what it is. Kind of goes down to a small set of skills, but being a master of them is the difficult part. Reverse engineering. This is the business of reverse engineering. There's nothing else to it. If you know how to reverse engineer, you're going to be successful at this business. Reading and writing assembly is another one of the things that they talk about. C++ is a pretty standard thing that you're going to learn how to write to be able to interact, to write test inputs for these programs. Python for automating, doing any binary manipulation. And of course, you're dealing with programs that are crashing, you have to know how to debug. If you could just take that away from this entire talk, that's the most important thing. Because if you know that stuff and you come to me in an interview and you show me you know how to do this stuff, you're hired. So what do we use to reverse engineer? The industry standard right now is IDA Pro. It has support for every processor set that's out there that's really useful. The debugging support is built into it, so if you're debugging and you're trying to reverse engineer at the same time, it works really well. It's integrated. There's many resources that are out there. In other words, since it's the most popular product, there are books galore out there. There are forums. There are blogs about it, talking about how to get the best use out of IDA Pro out there. But it is also the most expensive option. So I don't know if UAT has a budget for this type of stuff. I know they buy a lot of cool things for you guys, but this would be one of those things where you make the school buy it for you. because it's about $1,000 to $2,000 a license. And if you want the really fancy features, you'll easily pay upwards to about $5,000. So and the reason why is because it was the only product that was out there in the market that actually did this type of stuff that was really good. It's really good. It's not really that good. It is the only there's the only product that is out there that did this, so therefore you're kind of inclined to say it's good. But that wasn't true until just recently. So we're all broke, we don't really make money, we're college students, we don't have the $5,000 to just throw down. This Binary Ninja was the newest product that's out there in the market. It is very minimalist. It came out 2 years ago. I worked with all of these guys who created this product. I worked for Raytheon at one point. They quit 2 years ago to basically start the new company, Vector 35, to be able to create this product and other things as well. So we have the newest product in the market is Binary Ninja. It costs about $150 per license. Maybe if you're doing commercial work, which we're not, it'll cost you about $500. But as an active community, the whole vulnerability research industry is kind of jumping in on this because we have the ability to influence a product as it's being developed, and we can get the things that we care about. So we're seeing a lot of the new features that are coming out benefit the VR industry. So this is actually a really good product to start learning how to use and help you to learn how to reverse engineer. So when I'm talking about reverse engineering, has anybody had any experience with that here? A couple guys? So the idea is I have a simple program here. I'm going to compile it. I'm going to get a binary out of it, and it turns into a bunch of ones and zeros or hex. And the idea is that when I plug that binary into a product, this is Binary Ninja, I'm going to get the assembly for it. And so this is the thing that I want people to understand is how to convert this code down into this, and then from this back into our code. That is the skill set that we need. Being able to understand what that means. So, yeah, assembly and reverse engineering go hand in hand. You need to learn how to read it. You can't reverse engineer unless you know how to read assembly. But if you want to be an exploit dev, if you want to get into writing exploits, then you have to know how to write it as well. It's easy to read it. You can learn. I know how to read a lot of languages. I don't know how to write a lot of them because I've never really needed to write an exploit for weirdo systems. But Intel, ARM, MIPS, PowerPC, those are all the big names of languages that are worth knowing how to read at the very least. So if you want to make yourself marketable, learn how to write it. It's absolutely imperative to at least read. So C, I've only really written C code to just write tools to hack stuff. Like I don't expect anybody to really be really proficient at this. I just want you to be able to understand how to write a tool that can generate inputs that your program can understand, learn how to call APIs with this type of stuff. C++ is really nice. I think just from a reverse engineering standpoint, this is just from experience, C++ is a different world when you're reverse engineering it. There's a lot of weird constructs to it that you have to understand when it comes to reverse engineering. So at the very least, that's something that you can look into. Python is probably one of the best languages. Other people talked about Ruby and Perl. Python was the most called out language for requirements. It's great for automating. So we talked about writing these test inputs. Now we want to automate a program to opening them so we can test that just continuously in the background. So we're always constantly doing some analysis on a binary. It's perfect for binary manipulation. So like if you're attacking a network service, you can construct network packets, throw it over the wire, and Python is perfect for it. And scripting any type of analysis, obviously. So I never use Python as a programming language other than just scripting. I don't think it actually has a purpose beyond that, in my opinion. So other languages, yeah, like I said, other languages can be used, but it's really just up to the use case that you're trying to figure out. Python is really good for pretty much everything. So, but like I said, I'm not asking you to be developers. I'm not asking you to write this great code. I'm not asking you to do crazy things with it. I just want you to be able to write a tester, be able to analyze the product you're attacking. Unless the goal is to produce a product, then maybe you'll have to go through a more formal development process, but I'm not asking you guys to be really good at this. And the other thing I always see hung up on people who are starting to get into this industry is they try to over-engineer a solution. The idea is that if you want to find an API that maybe takes in user input and you want to test that API, you just want to write a simple program that's going to use that API and just throws things at it. You don't need to figure out how to write this complete, complicated application that does that one thing, because you might realize that API doesn't even yield any bugs, and now you just wasted a lot of time. So the number of test.cs that I have on my desktop is ridiculous. That's the level of development that we're in. We're just trying to make some hack solutions to be able to hack on programs. And debugging, understanding what causes your program to crash is paramount. Like understanding what types of different crashes, why things are happening, and understanding the behavior of your program based on the inputs that you're feeding it is absolutely necessary. So depending on the operating system you're using, depending on which platform you're going to use, you're going to have LLDB, GDB, WinBag. So when you pick your operating system that you're going to be testing on, get familiar with these things. They're not always available. Actually, most of the things that I've looked at in my career, I've never had a debugger. Until recently, I didn't really know how to use any of these debuggers because I've lived in the life of Apple, and iOS does not have a proper debugger that you can use. So that's why I've always been a reverse engineering guy. But now I've moved on to some other things, and so I'm having to start learning how to use WinDebug and LLDB and stuff. So this is, I mean, you don't, like I said, you don't have to be proficient in any of these things, but you have to be able to understand why they operate and why they work. But they're not always available, so you might have to always end up writing your own. So we really try to simplify the process down. I know this is starting to seem overwhelming, but the idea is that we just want to write a tool that creates test inputs. My reverse engineering skills are going to tell me what our program is going to do. We're going to understand what parts of the program we're interested in testing because we know that those complicated functions probably yield bugs. So we're going to figure out how can we reach that code. And we also reverse engineer to find bugs. I always find bugs, the way that I find bugs in software is through strictly reverse engineering. So I'm just going to start looking for patterns that yield bugs, and that's what I do best. Other people might find that they do a more dynamic approach versus static approach. So debugging the system is obviously, like I said, understanding where the crashes are happening. But the most important thing that I think that I learned from my education here was what we needed to know, which is operating system concepts. Understanding operating system internals, just the general concepts. I'm not talking about, I use Windows all the time and I'm pretty good at interacting with it. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about actually knowing the internals of the operating system, what's making it go. So pick an operating system you're comfortable with now, just go with it. If you're really feeling adventurous, maybe you start with an internet, IoT device. They're everywhere, they're all in our homes, they're all connected to the internet, and all their security is complete garbage. So these are all things that you could start getting started on, but I would just start with something that you're familiar with. It's common grounds. That if you're just using Windows right now, stick with Windows. It's pretty good. I am seeing though an industry change to shift more towards Android, iOS, and embedded systems. Mobile and embedded systems are two of the big hot topics right now. So if you want to be ahead of the schedule, be ahead of the game a little bit, mobile devices and embedded systems. I would try to start with embedded systems, honestly. Mobile is hot. Everybody right now is looking at it, and it's extremely, the level, the barrier to entry is pretty high at that point. But starting with embedded systems, that's a pretty good place to start. But like I was saying earlier, I'm not saying, I know how to use the system. I want you to be able to describe to me, how does a stack work? How does a stack work for that system? Is it any different from any other? When I allocate a piece of memory, what's actually happening with the heap allocator? I want to know file formats. What's the difference between the .data versus the .bss versus the .text or .code, whatever it is. I want to know why file formats are important in any of that stuff, because knowing the differences between that stuff is very useful for us. Day in, day out, we're looking at binaries, so I got to know where to find individual components of that binary, and I got to know the differences. Inter-process communication, so when process A wants to tell process B something, if I'm in process A, if I own process A and I need to go to process B, how do I talk to that other process? Is it sockets, messages, files through pipes? How does that work for your system? I want to know how drivers talk. What is the formal process that a driver talks to a piece of hardware? And how does the kernel allow you to do that? And file systems as well. These are all basically hot topics for us to understand. And so I know it seems like it's a lot to understand, and it seems like it's a lot to know, but I'm not expecting you to know all of it right away. These are things that you're going to learn as you're starting to go through this whole process. And so you're not going to be an expert in all of these things, but you become an expert as you're starting to go along. So the idea is that we have the opportunity to become experts in crazy things. One year I'll be doing routers, the next year I'm doing iOS, the next year I'm doing Android, and I'm going to become an expert in all those little individual things. Other people will just become good at that one thing that they do. And we have really cool, unique environment where we get to specialize in anything that we're interested in attacking at that time. So that's what makes this really fun. So how do we get started? The idea is that I found a lot of resources. These are resources that when someone comes and interviews with me and they fail the interview, we don't typically let them go away without giving them homework. And the reason why is if we really like them, then we really want them to work for us, but we're not really willing to pay for their training and that type of thing. But we want to be able to hire someone that's going to be able to do something day one, that type of thing. So what we do is we give them homework. We say, come back in a month or two or whatever, just come back and then re-interview with us after you've done your homework. And then 9 times out of 10, we've seen they work for us. So these are things that we tell them to do. ExploitExercises.com was an excellent resource that came out a few years back. And this is from their homepage, Nebula, Protostar, and Fusion. These are all things that basically, they're individual systems. And Nebula is like kind of a foundations course for Linux. Protostar is a intermediate course for understanding how to do like old style exploits, and then Fusion is the more modern system, tutorial to doing exploitation on Linux for more modern systems. So it's basically a series of virtual machines, and there's a whole bunch of challenges, like challenge 0 through 20 or so. It's all Linux based, which is, so if your choice of operating system is Linux, this is probably the one you want to go with. But as you start going through that website, you're going to see that when you click on a challenge, it's going to show you source code. That's the answer. All right, so we don't want to look at the answers. Remember, we're reverse engineers, and then we do answers after we solve the problem. So don't look at the source. Try to approach this problem from a reverse engineering standpoint. You get a binary, you throw it into IDA, you throw it into Binary Ninja, and you're going to understand what that program does. And if you need help from the supplement, it's okay to start in the beginning to do that, to look at the source and the binary of the assembly, and try to do some comparisons and start learning from that way. But the idea is that you want to challenge yourself, you want to learn how to get good at this. You're going to want to reverse engineer, solve the answer, or solve the problem, and then check the source to verify what you did. So basically, the way that I always approach these things is you understand the binary by learning how to use it. Run the program, see what it's doing. If you run it, it says, give me the answer. You provide an answer, and it says wrong answer, and then it closes out. So now I've got two things that I know. There's a thing where it's saying, give me an answer, and it waits for an input, and another thing that says wrong answer. So what constitutes a wrong answer? And maybe I get my debugger and I stop right when it's waiting for the input, and that's where I start reverse engineering. I try to figure out what that input's going to do, and again, what constitutes a wrong answer. So those are two things, there's two goals that I got to find out when I'm reverse engineering these things. So you figure out why it behaves the way it does, you modify your input to produce a different result. And then ultimately you're going to basically get the answer to the program by reverse engineering this all out. So you got to check source code after you're done. So don't cheat, because otherwise you're not going to get good. CoreLineTraining.com this is the big one. Actually, we make our people, when they're just sitting around doing training and other stupid things, because Raytheon, we tell them to do this on the side. We'll actually pay people to do this training, basically. But the idea is that this is our Windows-based training, or rather one that was come out by CoreLine. But it's the same concept. You got the foundations, you got the intermediate, and then you got the advanced level stuff where they talk about how to bypass modern-day protections at the end. And it teaches you everything you need to know. It has a lot of reading to do. So that's one of those things that you gotta really kind of persevere through that. It's a lot of reading. There's a lot of content. And so if you have zero experience with any of this stuff, it's perfect for that because it tells you everything you need to know about how to jump into this industry. It's all Windows-based, like we said, and it basically teaches you how to write exploits as well. The other one kind of gets you, exploit exercises kind of gets you into that right mindset. You're going to write some exploits, but this one's all about, okay, how do I bypass all of these modern-day, DEP and ASLR mitigations? Now, granted, the training is from 2012, I think. So modern day is not. There's been a lot of new things that have come out in Windows and Chrome and Google. All these companies are coming out with new ways every 6 months on how to make the exploitation game a lot more interesting. So you'll learn. It does definitely get you up to the speed on what this business is all about. Then this is the one that. So I'd like to think that we're all like a bunch of young dudes who are in this industry because everything we do is typically game-based. So here's an MMO that you can use that was created by are one and only people who created Binary Ninja. So Vector 35 came out with this, and it is actually developed by one dude, which is pretty insane. But the idea is that it's an MMO. You set it up a private server, and you can. The only way to win is to cheat and to exploit the server. And everything, it has everything from quests to bosses to loot, all these other things. And so the only way to actually capture the rewards of the quest is to cheat. And they've created all the networking logic, they've created all the game logic, they created all the client logic. And the idea is that you're going to reverse engineer all of these products, and you're going to basically try to figure out what it takes to win to get the prize to solve the problems. So it's a huge world of just like monsters and creatures and all stuff like that, and you just run around. I did this when they first debuted it at a conference. It was actually it's like a capture the flag type thing, because the rewards that you would win by exploitation is capturing these flags to gain points to win. And so I played, I think, for like a day and a half, and this was actually a lot of fun, because it's either the logic is client-side based, where you can cheat on your client because there's no authentication on the server, so then now you can fly around the world. And then there's also certain things where you exploit the server to tell the game, give me some super ball, badass loot that's going to make me win. So this is actually a really, really awesome thing that you can look into, probably after you start getting more familiar with reverse engineering, because it is pretty difficult.
What was the name of that?
Pwnadventure.com, but it's Pony Island, yeah. It's really, really cool. And I just wanted to point out there's a couple other things that are out there. Crack me's are one of the big things that you can use to help reverse engineering with supplementing your reverse engineering skills. They're just basically like little small problems that you can only solve by reverse engineering and understanding the logic of the program. And it's the same thing. It's like, okay, you run it and it says, give me the answer, and you give something that says wrong answer, and you got to find out what that answer is. And some of them start from being very simple to being extremely, extremely time consuming, where you'll spend like a week reverse engineering this thing just to get the answer, and it's just going to get you a lot better. I would also say, if you guys start getting really, really good at this stuff, creating a team here that does CTFs. Has anybody done a capture the flag competition anywhere? Sweet. Did you guys have a team?
Yes.
Awesome. So that's one of the big things. Getting if you want notoriety and you're good at this, capture the flags is absolutely the way to do it, because everybody who does capture the flags are all people who are sitting in this industry that just want to do this on the side for fun. And crackme's, this is an older version of my slide deck. I actually had a URL here. It's crackmes.cf. That's the mirror of crackmes.de, which has been since closed because it was a German thing and Germany didn't like that, I guess. Crackmes.cf, that's what it was. But basically, it's what it says. It's varying difficulties of little like reverse engineering challenges. And capture the flag, for those who aren't familiar with it, it's this idea of it's a game where everyone has services that are supposed to be running all the time, and they're vulnerable. And as they start releasing more and more services out, you're supposed to be able to write a patch for the existing service because they're vulnerable, and at the same time write an exploit to exploit everybody else on the network to gain points. And so as the exploits are being thrown out, there's a whole strategy to this where people are just listening onto the network. Maybe they're writing patches, and then they just sit on the network, listen for exploits being thrown over. They capture that exploit, reverse engineer it out, and then send it to other people and reuse it. So that's like, there's a whole defend and attack goal with it. It's super fun. This URL here, fuzzle.com, 2016 DEFCON CTF. So Fuzzle is this guy who worked at Raytheon. He was part of the Legit BS organization, which is the guys who create and host and run all of the DEFCON CTF games. And so they come out with challenges all the time. They come out with a whole bunch of challenges and stuff. And so he basically got all of the DEFCON CTF binaries, most of them anyways, and got them all running on one single VM. And so the idea is that he's got a really good blog post talking about all of the things, the limitations and all the things that make it work. But if you wanted to start practicing on CTFs, there are tons of write-ups out there to tell you how they solved, how certain people, certain contestants solved different CTF challenges. But this basically gives you a VM of all the existing ones that exist out there, and you could just go test it on your own. So, I mean, in my opinion, the way that I would set this up, if you guys got like a club that does these things, pick one for a week and just work on it for a week, and then just do that every week. And that's the only way you're really going to get good at this. And yeah, so we're pretty much winding down. I haven't really told you guys much about the industry, in my opinion. I just told you, yeah, you can make a lot of money if you do it. But the idea is that I wanted to give you guys some resources and some things to think about when you're looking to hone your skills and you want to jump into this industry. But we've only really scratched the surface. You can have entire courses about how to reverse engineer, techniques to finding bugs. You know, oftentimes the problem that this has come up for me with emulation is where, okay, you're going to go spend the next year with this binary. We don't have hardware for it. We don't have debuggers. We don't have any real knowledge or any documentation. We just have a binary. We need to, by the way, exploit it. And it needs to work 100% of the time. And it's this weird thing that only exists in one part of the world. Sweet. Sounds like a tough problem. How do I do that? Reverse engineering. I'm going to write an emulator for it. How do I emulate the system? That's in and of itself. It's another art. Introspection, again, learning how to write your own debuggers, understanding what things that are needed to write a debugger. And modern day mitigations, I mean, if you even had a course on modern day mitigations, it'd be out of date for next semester because people are coming out with new ways to make this job a little bit more challenging and more fun. So, if you take away anything, reverse engineering and assembly are a must. C to write tools, Python for automating and binary manipulation, debugging to understand why your program's crashing, and understanding operating system concepts. If you can do any of those things, that's like the core thing to take away of how to get into this industry is knowing these core concepts and getting very good at reverse engineering. So if any of this seems interesting, I have a table starting at 2, and we could talk about it. I have plenty of stories to give and ideas and tips and tricks and whatever. I've been in the industry for 8 years, so I've been doing it for a little while. But I'll have some spot the bug challenges there. If you can find some bugs in some source code. I've got these, I've only got a couple of them. I've got little boards. You plug it in, there's like a serial interface to it. And it's like a text-based adventure game. And if you find some of your hardware buddies, there's actually some pinouts on there that you can use to dump the firmware out. The only way to win the game is to cheat. So that's like the type of stuff that we do. So it's a little fun game. If you can solve my problem, solve my challenges, then I'll give you one of these boards. So my business cards also have a whole bunch of challenges written all over them. They have NFC chips on them. So if you have an NFC reader somewhere around here, you can read out that binary, and it's got a whole bunch of other challenges as well. So like I said, everything we do here is all games. And arguably, a lot of this stuff is a game. So thanks guys. My name is Bryan Carpenter. You can catch me on LinkedIn. You can catch me on that Raytheon email address. Come find me at my table. You can get a business card later. But yeah, we're good to go. Thank you guys. I guess any Q&As or whatever, I guess we didn't even have that. But if you guys have questions, we've got a couple minutes left.
Could you maybe touch a little bit more about how you got your first job at the NSA and what that interview process was like?
Yeah, so it was actually, so I started with an internship there. Basically, again, like with that presentation as I was telling that story, was they basically said, oh, we're centers of excellence, and I'm not sure if that's still true or not. So if we are, basically they said, okay, take all these courses and you guaranteed a job, right? Well, you weren't guaranteed it, but you still have to do a little bit of work. The idea is that I did my internship. I had to sign up for my, I did all my paperwork to start me in the security processing. So I should preface all that with your security clearance. It takes people like us who are not going to the government about 2 years. It'll take someone who works for the NSA or the DoD or the FBI or the CIA, anything like that, a few months. So there's like a, we get dibs first on our people who are doing the background checks. So for me, it was, I waited 6 months before I heard anything back. So if you have to do your internship early, sign up for it now, get set up, ready to go as soon as you can. And then whenever your internship's required to do, like then they put you through the whole process. And basically the interview came down to, it wasn't so much that they were interviewing me, it was more so I was interviewing them, it was more me interviewing them. That's what it was. It was like, I was trying to figure out which office I wanted to stay in. So basically the way that it worked was, all these organizations that have the ability to bring in interns, they just basically say, okay, well, we need 3 interns. And so they'll schedule you in with different people based on whatever I think the way I had to do is I put in like things that I wanted to do, things that I liked, and what my interests were, and then I would get paired up with like 3 people who basically said, here's a briefing of what our program does. And it came down to like, okay, well, I had 3 choices and I picked one, and that's what I went with. And so when I graduated, or when I finished my internship there, they had a job fair for all the interns there, and I basically had picked the operating systems division. That's who I interviewed with, and I really enjoyed their work. Had the ability, because you have the ability to kind of talk at a classified level about what these companies, what these little organizations within the NSA do. And I picked the operating systems division mostly because I thought that that was the one I was going to benefit the most education-wise. And it was actually very rewarding. So I had a job coming out, and then I finished my senior year, and I went back to go work for the NSA after the fact. So that interview process was, I think, was probably the most low stress, in my opinion. It was more work involved in the security process than getting the clearance than anything else. That was actually the most stressful part about it. Trying to find your whole life and figure out everyone's addresses and stuff. That is a nightmare. Anything else?
For reverse engineering debuggers, I only use
Ollie Debug is really great. I didn't mention that because I'm not too familiar with Windows. But if you're really good with Ollie Debug, I think the transition to using Binary Engine and IDA Pro should be really simple. I mean, they're very similar to one. Actually, Ollie Debug works with IDA Pro. They work together, so you can use them. You can use them interchangeably. Yeah. Cool. Anything else? All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Brian.
Yeah. Howdy.
I'm sorry.
Nice to meet you.
I'm only a senior in high school, but like I think I'm a the classes. I'm only 16, but I'm trying to get. I'm not sure which field I want to get into.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's going to be cybersecurity or if it's going to be into graphic design.
Yeah.
But other than that, those games, what else should I go to the library, check out a couple of books? Do you recommend any books I should check out?
Honestly, one of the books that I would highly recommend, especially if you're just starting to get new and you want to start using, like, Python's the easiest one to start learning in terms of programming languages. Red Hat Python was one that really helped me, and it teaches you a lot of things about how to use Python and then use it in a security context. Red Hat Python was one it's pretty good. But overall, I mean, the only way you're really going to learn this stuff is by doing it. And so if you get these exercises down and you start learning those things, like, that's really honestly the best way. It's easy for me to say, yeah, read a book and then you're going to, like, know it. But, like, in any of these interviews, they're not going to say, yeah, what books did you read? It's going to be, sit down at this computer and do this problem and show me that you know how to do it. So the only way you're really only going to do it is by doing it and using these tools and getting familiar with it and showing, especially in the interview process and stuff like that. Because otherwise, I mean, it's just book knowledge, you know? So honestly, that would be the thing. So Red Hat Python, and then actually doing the exercises that it has in there, but then actually sitting down and trying some of these exercises that I gave you.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Simon. Appreciate it.
Hi,
Howdy.
James.
Nice to meet you, James.
Nice to meet you.
I'm gonna pull them out right now. So,
Thank you.
it's James.
Yes. I actually had some questions and advice. I just applied actually for an NSA internship for the coming summer. I was wondering, like, what type of interview questions and what are they looking for beyond, like, because I know they were looking for assembly, networking knowledge, all the basic stuff.
Yeah.
They have most of that, but like, say I do get accepted, I was wondering, like, what type of questions they were going to be asking me and stuff like that.
So like I remember sometimes what they would ask me, like one organization basically said, okay, I have a CD. It's kind of like the scenario that I gave where I have something on there. What's the process that you're going to take to hack this? What's the process? Like, think about the entire story of, I've got a CD with something on it. What am I going to do? And I need to interact with that software. I need to understand what it is. Like, what's that process? And think about that from that standpoint. The only other interviewing technique that I think I'd give you is that if you've got your resume and you have all of these little individual parts about what you know and all those things, is having a story for every single line item. Like when they say, like, oh, you know Python, why? Well, like, what do you know about it? Okay, well, let me tell you what I did with this, and basically have like there's nothing wrong with having a whole scripted part for your resume. That's honestly one of the big things, because they're going to be asking about your resume for the most part, and being able to say, this is what I did, versus don't ever say like, this is what, oh, I worked on a team, this is what we did. Nobody cares about that. This is what I did and this is why I was successful, that type of thing. But honestly, most of the problems kind of came down to like, what do you know, and you know, it just kind of came down to that. The only real challenging one was like, I have a CD and here's what's the process you're going to take to understand it and attack it.
Okay. And does Raytheon offer any internships?
We do internships,
Like
absolutely.
over the summer?
Yeah, we'll do summer internships. So we just, in fact, I'm the person who tasks the interns.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so I come up with all these crazy things. Do we have to go?
We're cool. We're cool. You
Okay.
can finish answering your questions.
Yeah. So basically, the idea was that the internships, the interviews are about the same as we give the full-time engineers.
Okay.
So it's going to be of equal difficulty in terms of like what you're going to know. The idea and the way that process works is, I do the interviewing, so I'm going to be sitting down, I'm going to give you source code. I want you to spot the bug in 2 different programs, and I want you to assemble another one. Okay, and the other one, another person will give you is a hands-on. They're going to give you a challenge, and they're going to say, hack this binary. We don't know anything about it, reverse engineer it.